Welcome to a community built of tomorrow's business leaders. Hey guys, I'm William Freitas, and this is the Socius podcast. Steve Grace, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
I'm super excited to have you on the show. We've worked well together. You've helped me, hire people in the past, which has been fantastic.
We have. Wasn't me, but we have. Was it Carly? It was Carly, right?
It was Carly, yeah. And she did a great job. But, mate, you did a great job, and she spoke very highly of you. And I'm a big fan of yours as well, mate, and, a good friend. So
likewise.
I'm super excited to have you on the show. But I won't introduce you. You do the best introduction. So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and I guess what's led you to be where you are today.
Well, first, I'm very excited to be answering the questions rather than asking the questions, because as anyone who knows me well knows, I do like to talk. And when you're asking the questions, apparently there's part of that where you actually have to sit and listen, which I'm not overly good at. So this should be easier for me now. So I'm quite pleased about that.
The floor is yours.
The floor is mine. So how far back do you want me to go?
Go to where you started, because this podcast is slightly different. We want to understand who Steve Grace is.
Okay.
Where did you start? Where did you go to school? What were your parents like? Let's start there.
Okay.
Where did you go to school?
Way back. Okay.
Yeah.
I went to a school in Surrey called Caterham, which is a very expensive school. We had school on Saturday as well. So I did 6 days school my whole life, which is awful. Wednesday afternoons was always combined cadet force stuff, and then Saturday morning, we had lessons, and then Saturday afternoon was rugby, swimming, whatever. So it was 6 days. So I had that my whole life. It was a beautiful school. It was a bit like Hogwarts. It was one of the oldest schools. I was very lucky to go there, and I loved school. Had a ball. Not particularly good at it. Horrifically dyslexic. Not that we knew when I was at school, but I have a quite a aggressive dyslexia. There's I don't know if you know, but there's about 200 different types of dyslexia, and I've got quite a lot of them. And unfortunately for my son, so is he. So I found school difficult from a learning perspective, but I really enjoyed the social aspect of it. So all boys school, very traditional. I grew up in Surrey. Father's got an interesting story. I won't go into too long because I could do the whole podcast on my dad, but he essentially was a Harley Street dentist. And he found out he had a solid neck bone rather than segmented neck bone. And he had 3 kids at private school, big house in Surrey, and could no longer do dentistry. So he then went off. A lot of people don't know. He was the first person to actually import rap music into the UK. My dad's the biggest nerd with like 3 PhDs. You just wouldn't have ever thought it. And then he ran numerous other businesses after that just to carry on life, I guess.
So dentistry to rap music.
Yep. And then he ended up, what else did he do? He did financial planning. He started his own conference business. He wrote 9 books on computer programming when VIC-20s and Commodore 64s were coming out. So he's one of those guys who just sort of turned himself to anything.
I suspect there was some dyslexia there as well. Or
with him? No, not at all.
Not at all?
No.
Okay.
No, neither of my parents have. Actually, it's a good question. Where did that come from? Mum stayed at home. Beautiful family, really easy family life. Sister and brother, elder sister, younger brother. Quite a charmed childhood, you might say. Didn't go to uni, much to my parents' dismay, although they pretended they were okay about it. And I went and tried to play tennis professionally, which was a disaster.
Yep.
Thought it was going to be good. Was not good. It was a disaster. Didn't win anything. Didn't really make any money, but had probably the best year and a half of my life. And it changed me as a person. I was quite shy before that, and it really brought my personality out, my confidence out, and it was probably the best thing I could have done.
And why tennis? Obviously, there was a fair few sports. You mentioned you were playing rugby and so on.
So I took tennis up really late, like 15, 16. Yeah. And I got good at it quite quickly. But then everyone went, oh, wow, this guy must be really good. He should go and play tennis. So I'm like, oh, wow, I'm really good. I should go and play tennis, as you do when you're that age. So I did. What unfortunately happened was I plateaued very quickly at that level where everyone said, oh, he's gotten really good really quickly. Unfortunately, I didn't get any better. Okay. So look, I had the best time, and I don't regret it one iota, but I made zip money, but it did change me as a person. When I left doing that, I had a sister who was a lawyer. I had a brother who was at uni. I didn't really know what I was going to do. Decided to go and be a waiter, which seemed like the obvious choice. Wasn't very good at that either. The silver service, with the 2 spoons, very difficult, ridiculous concept. Why they ever
Didn't know which side was which.
Why would you do that? It just doesn't make any sense. So I did that for a while, and then I decided that definitely sales was where I should be. So I did door-to-door sales. I did perfumes, fake perfumes, the ones that were illegal. We can talk about that now because it's a different country. And then I did kitchen knives door-to-door, and I was quite good at that. And that was a big American company called Cutco. And I was part of the Diamond Club and all that sort of shenanigans. But it wasn't really what you would call a career, as my father put it. So I decided to go and work in finance.
Before we even go on to there, I want to stop you for a second. You managed to grow up being a quite shy child.
Yes.
You took on tennis for a year and a half.
Yes.
And you suddenly decide you want to do sales.
Yes.
That's a big bridge to build. What was it in tennis that changed you as a person? I appreciate, brought you out of your shell, but how so?
Have you ever played a sport with lots of people watching?
Sure.
So I'd never really done that. Not really at school. School you might have had, 40 or 50 people there. But if you start playing and there's lots of people watching, and there are coaches analysing everything you do, I don't know. That seemed to just make me more comfortable in myself. I think the fact that I'd gotten out of an environment like we talked about where I was dyslexic, which was very difficult for me, into an environment where no one required me to read or spell. All I had to do was hit a fuzzy little yellow thing as hard as you can at the other person. Well, ideally not at the other person, actually. Maybe that's where I went wrong. Maybe that's what it was. I've never analysed it, but I changed enormously during that year. And I think maybe I just became comfortable in myself because even though I wasn't very good at that either, I was probably better at that than I was at spelling and reading. I'm not sure. It's a good question, but I think that's probably what it was. And my personality grew very quickly in a very short space of time. It probably hasn't changed much since then. Because
the interesting thing is that sort of pressure, particularly in an individual sport, can sometimes break people.
Not if you're bad. There's no pressure. No one expects you to win. It's easy.
At some point, they thought you were great, though. And you
before I started,
But interestingly, that sort of pressure sort of had you. It seems as if you sort of gave up the idea of being perfect or being great at something. Or
I did that in a group. So I joined a thing called. I was picked to join, and this was what sort of set me on it. I tried out for this thing called the Stonebridge Academy, which used to exist. Adrian Stonebridge, suntanned guy, looked like the typical tennis coach, and he trained a lot of very famous coaches, and he had started this academy to try and train new people in England, rebirth the British tennis, and I got picked for that, and I was very surprised. There were lots of people tried out. I was easily the worst in that group that got picked. There were 12 of us, and maybe that gave me the confidence, and I improved, and I just had the best time, and that came with sponsorship from Puma and Nike, and it got us onto some of the tours and all that sort of stuff, and we also passed all our coaching exams during that time as well. So I don't know, maybe I was doing that. You see, you talk about individual sport. I was in a group of 12 people that I became incredibly close with over 18 months before we sort of stopped. And it was at the end of that I realized that probably going out on the tour on my own would be the worst decision in terms of my ability just wasn't anywhere near the others.
And so then how did you go from there to then saying sales is for me? Like, what was it of sales that interested you?
Money.
Honestly,
okay. Money. And I think, and this is something that I've realized about myself more. I'm a Sagittarian. I hate being told what to do by anybody.
Like most entrepreneurs,
Hate it. And sales is a very free place to work. It's up to you. You make the decisions. You decide how many calls you make. You decide what you say. There's no structure really, well there is, but not compared to other industries. I had a lot of freedom to do things my way, the way that I wanted, and I think that's what appealed to me. That's what I didn't love about being a waiter, particularly silver service, having to do things it was a stupid way, in my opinion. Why would we do it that way? This is a much better way. No one cared. So I wanted to go into an industry where I could do things my way, and I think that's why sales appealed to me. When you're wandering from house to house in wealthy suburbs selling Cutco knives, you can do it any way you want, right? You can knock on the door, you can scream at them, you can throw knives at walls. We had a whole array of ridiculous sideshow things. So we had rope that we'd cut. And we'd ask them for their steak knife, and we'd cut the rope. We wouldn't put any pressure on. Then we'd use our knife, and we'd put loads of pressure on and go, look how much better my knife is. And we had a pair of scissors that could cut a 2-cent coin and turn it into a corkscrew. So you learn all these gimmicky things, and you can do those your own way. So I think there was no one there watching me, and I just enjoyed that freedom, I think.
And I think too, I've spoken to other business owners who have a similar experience when they first started out going door knocking. I suspect there's a whole lot of rejection involved in that as well.
A fair bit, yeah.
How did you react to that? I mean,
Just go to the next one.
probably
Again,
worked out well with your tennis career.
Well, maybe, yeah. It's very. I think the thing about sales is it's very simple. You know, if you get rejected, well, you just go to the next one. There's no other option. I mean, you can't just stand there and hope they're going to open the door again later and change their mind. So you just move on to the next one. So I still, to this day, am a very simple person. I'm not good with complicated things. I like everything to be simple, and I try and keep everything in my life as simple as I can. And
so then you went from selling knives. How did you, pun intended, cut to the next spot?
So because of the school I went to, it was very easy for me to get a job. That was terrible. See, my listening skills are there.
I had to.
I don't want to say.
Go on.
So because of my school, it was very easy for me to get a job in finance. Old school tie connections still exist very much in London. So I got a job with NatWest's motor finance arm called Lombard. And I went and worked there, and I started dating the CEO's daughter, and I got promoted. I was the youngest ever account manager. Again, it was sales. My job was to drive around all the used car dealerships, very glamorous, and get them to use our finance rather than our competitors' finance. I was quite good at that because I got on with people quite easily. I don't know how much experience you have of dealing with lots of used car salespeople, but they vary enormously in their in every way, in the way that they represent themselves. You got the posh ones, you got the rough ones, you got the illegal ones. You got all sorts, right? So I learned how to deal with lots of different people. I then got promoted up to looking after the proper car garages, like the Peugeot, the Nissan. I hated that because everyone was so stuffy.
Right.
And that's when I thought, I got to leave this. This is not good for me. They wanted me to do exams because it's finance. I hate exams. I don't study very well. So I decided to go to a recruitment company and find another job.
So was it the technical piece of the finance stuff that?
Yeah.
That
it was the study. It was the fact that they put me in for my first exam. I remember getting on the bus, heading to the exam, unwrapping all the study notes with the cling film. So I hadn't even opened them. I'd literally not looked at them. We'd had 4 months to study. I hadn't even opened them. So I'm opening them on the train thinking, I've got 30 minutes. How hard can this be? This thing's like 200 pages thick. I open it up. I can't even read it properly. Get there, obviously fail. Didn't really understand the questions, let alone the answers. They weren't over the moon about my effort levels. I was like, I don't think this is the right career for me. So I left.
Yep.
So I went to a recruitment company. And
this is still in the UK?
This is still in the UK. So I went to a recruitment company in Piccadilly Circus called Computer People. And I wandered in. And I'd wandered into one prior to that. And they told me they couldn't help me. So that was a good experience. And I wandered into this one. And they said, why don't you come work for us? And like all the strategic decisions in my life, I said, all right, that sounds like a good idea. What do I have to do? And they said, well, normally we start you off as a resourcer, but you've got some sales experience, so we'll just whack you in as a consultant. Now, this was the days when there were 80 consultants in a hall. We all had phones. You didn't get your chair till you'd done your first deal. Your computers were like the green screen, old AS400s.
Yep.
If you wanted to advertise a job, you put it in we were doing IT recruitment, so you put it in either Computer Weekly or Computing. It would come out a week later, and then resumes would get posted to you. So it was very fast-paced.
Yeah, wow.
You would then go through those resumes. You would try and find people that matched your jobs. You would interview them, and then you'd fax the resumes over.
I can't, and I think everyone listening to this, Steve, will get that there's an energy about you, and I can't imagine someone with your energy waiting for snail mail coming through with resumes.
But there was no other. I mean, no one knew any different. That was it. I mean, I loved that job because that job, I'm sure everyone's seen old movies of people in trading rooms or Boiler Room, the movie Boiler Room, right? Vin Diesel's first experience or any of those, right? There's people, probably more Boiler Room, where they're all standing up, waving paper, shouting at each other. That's what this place was like, but 80 people. I love the energy of it. It was just everyone was just mad and screaming at each other. Very competitive. And again, it was very simple. If you did a deal each week, you got to keep your job. If you didn't, you didn't. And it was that simple. And I really sort of resonate well with simple things. So I knew I just had to do a deal each week. I knew what I needed to do that deal. I could work as hard or as not hard as I wished to do that. So I found it very comforting. It was a comfort zone for me. So I loved doing that and had a fair bit of success doing that. And there's a lot of things that we shouldn't talk about on podcasts that happened in those, and we can talk about them later, but it was some crazy times. And then inevitably, success brought someone trying to headhunt me into a company called Michael Page, which still exists, I'm sure you're aware, which is another recruitment company.
Yeah. And before we go into talking about Michael Page, you mentioned the competitiveness on what is much like the trading floor.
Yeah.
I want to sort of draw some alignment to your time playing tennis. How much competition was in that in itself? Because, in any competitive sport, particularly in individual competitive sport, there's going to be some level of competition. Now, you may not have been great at tennis, but there was some competition, and that was, as you describe it, a great 1.5 years, and it changed you as a person. What was the competition like back on the tennis court versus, in the business world?
Business world was far more brutal. I mean, the resumes would come in and they would be put in what was called a day file, right? So the day file was the resumes that had come in that day. Now, if you got that first, you were ahead of the game, right? Because you got to see the resumes first and you take them out. You'd hide them in your drawer. You'd do all sorts of stuff, right? So there was a lot of competitiveness about that.
Yeah.
You might be trying to get your candidate a job and 5 of your mates are also trying to get that same candidate their job. So it was really, really brutal. And you kind of have to learn how to work with those people without upsetting them, but at the same time beat them. So it's quite an interesting collaborative,
dynamic,
combative environment, I guess. I just loved it. I really enjoyed. It was so fast paced, even though you don't think so. It seemed very fast paced.
Yeah.
Actually, when email came, I remember when we got email, which, gosh, I'm showing my age. So when we first got email, we had 2 computers with email on.
This is going on the internet, by the way, Steve.
What's the
Just
internet?
letting you know.
There were the World Wide Web. So there were 2 computers with email, and I didn't know. And we all got 10 minutes on the computer a day. So I was sat down my first time. Didn't know anyone with an email address. So I asked the guy behind me in the queue, "What's your email address?" Sent him an email. "Hi."
Yeah.
And literally, that was the fact. Like it took such a long time to go from fax machines to using email and computers properly. People think it was quick, and it seems quick when you think back, but it was actually it was over a year before you really started doing it properly. So it was quite an interesting transition, and that's when that was even before online job boards came, transformed everything.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time. I think you learn a lot subconsciously during in that kind of environment. And I was very young. I was 24, 23, something like that.
And then you went to Michael Page, which obviously still exists. And what was your time like there?
Hated it.
Yep.
So I went there to do investment banking IT. I thought that'd be cool. I'd get to work in the Square Mile. We were working at Cannon Street. It involved a lot of drinking, which was obviously, being a young man in Britain, is pretty much all you do.
Yeah.
And I hated it. And I hated Michael Page because Michael Page is very structured. And you have to do things their way. And they pay you with discretionary bonuses rather than clear commission. And that just did not work for me. And the people that work at Michael Page love it. They just love it. So they were the opposite of me.
Right.
So again, it came to one of those really key moments where I made a strategic decision. I thought, all right, I've been at Michael Page 4 months, maybe 5. I can't leave. It's going to look bad on my resume. I know that. I'm a recruiter. This was before everybody moved jobs every 8 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, I need to stay 3 years. I can't stay 3 years. It's not possible. I know. I'll go to Australia. Because then there's a logical reason for me leaving Michael Page. That was literally my thought process. I think I'd seen a documentary, never been, and thought, Great Barrier Reef looks pretty epic.
Yeah.
Australia, here we come. So
It wasn't Crocodile Dundee by any chance?
No, it wasn't. No, I don't think that would have persuaded me. So I rang up about 8 mates and said, who wants to come to Australia? They all said yes. We all applied. That was when they were shipping us in like nobody's business. I was one of the first English recruiters to arrive here. I mean, they picked us up. We had a limo. They put us up in an apartment. They had people find houses for us. It was a long time ago. And we moved over, and it was awesome. And 2 of us came over. The rest of them didn't. And it was the promised land. It was hot. And I don't know if you would know this because you know me well. I'm a very solar-powered individual. That's why I shave my head. It's not because I'm losing my hair. It's to get more sunshine on there, right?
Aerodynamic as well.
It is aerodynamic.
Yep.
Should have done it when I was playing tennis. But I really liked the sunshine. So that was great. It was warm. It was .com boom, so it was really easy. Cold calling involved staring at the telephone, waiting for it to ring, which it pretty much did every 2 minutes. I was making a lot of money. Everything was fantastic. So I decided to stay. I only planned on coming here for a couple of years. And I went to work at a company called Candle, which was just like my first company, Computer People. So I loved it again. Very free, do what you want. As long as you're hitting your number, it was very simple. There were no rules and regulations. You just had to hit that number. How you do it, we don't care. If you don't come in all Friday because you've already hit the number, fine. So my kind of place.
That competitiveness that you really strived on.
And there was about 7 or 8 English guys who all started at the same time. So I had a friend group instantly because we were all starting together. None of us knew anybody. And, that all that worked really, really well for me. And I enjoyed that immensely. I then got given a little assistant. I shouldn't have called her that. She'd probably kill me. Who at the time was working for someone else, but she got assigned to me. And because I was hitting a certain number, you got someone to help you. Yeah. And her name was Nicole, and she has worked for me in every single company I've had since and works for me to this very day.
Wow.
She's also my wife's best friend and the reason I met my wife. Great. So she invited me to her birthday one night. I didn't want to go. She invited me again. I still didn't want to go. She invited me again. I'm going to go. Fine. So I went. I met my wife. Rang my girlfriend that night, dumped her, went out and asked my wife out the next day. So again, lots of strategic plays here.
Right.
And then I did that for a couple of years, and I decided I can't leave here. There's no way I'm going home, but I can't just keep doing this. I was still drinking a lot, not a very healthy lifestyle, as often comes when you're working really that hard. Yeah. So I went and joined Haze. This is what you call history repeating itself. Now, I went to Haze because Haze have a great management. And I knew I wanted to start my own business. I'd always known that, but I just didn't know how. So I thought I need to go and learn how to be a manager. So I went to Haze. Haze like Michael Page. So I hated it. It's very structured. And all the people at Haze love Haze.
Didn't learn from your mistake. It's fine.
Nope, not at all. But I did do the management training, and that was useful. And the day I got my permanent residency, I resigned, which is actually quite standard for most people that work at Haze. But might not want to publish
I thought you were going to say something about permanent residency.
No, I'm not saying about that. And started my first company, Fingerprint. Okay. So that was interesting. And a lot of mistakes came with that. I partnered up with someone who was a lot older than me. I let him take 51 and I took 49. They won't do that again. It was very successful. I enjoyed it. It grew quite large. We had a lot of fun. It was probably the most fun you can have at that age. I'm maybe 28 now, something like that. Yeah. Got married during that time. Fingerprint were happy days. And a lot of the people who work for me now work for me at Fingerprint as well.
The boom years, really. But we could dive into that. But I want to sort of digest a little bit of what you've spoken about so far and draw, some more alignment around the sales piece and the recruitment piece. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to get your thoughts on how they relate, because in my view, when you're hiring people, it's just as much as selling yourself and your organization to that potential hiree, for them to know where they're going to work. What's your view? Because I definitely see the alignment, but I want to get your view on that.
This is a really interesting topic, because up until probably 5 years ago, I would have told you recruitment's a sales role. Because that's what everyone told me, and that's what I was always told, and that's what everyone said. You have to be a salesperson, and you do, because you have to find a candidate and persuade them the job's great. Then you have to put the candidate in front of the client and persuade them the client's good, and then you have to sell the client back to the candidates. You're selling all the time. Yeah. So it is a sales job, but I think every job's a sales job. I actually don't think it's any more of a sales job than any other job. Right. I think actually what it is it's a role where you develop skills for matching people. Essentially, you're dealing with these people's lives. Like most people spend more time at work than they do anywhere else. Everyone knows that. This person has come to you to try and find a job. This company has come to you to try and find a person. Now, it's absolutely imperative they get the right person for their business to succeed. It's imperative for this person in their career development, whether they're going to be able to pay for their houses or wives or children or whatever it is, that they get a good job as well. And I don't think when you're young, you quite understand that sense of responsibility. And I think when I became a business owner, I began to understand that sense of responsibility, because something I talk about a lot, when you are a business owner, you're responsible for your staff, but you're responsible for all their families as well. And I think people forget that. And if you've never owned a business, I don't think, with a lot of staff, I don't think you understand how much that weighs on you. It's enormous weight on you. And there's no way of explaining that to someone other than you doing it. Much like having a child, much like getting married, much like many experiences in life, you can't actually explain what it feels like. And I think when I became a business owner, I then began to understand the actual power and weight of responsibility a recruiter has. And I reckon 98% of recruiters have got no idea or concept of that still today, unfortunately. But in terms of your concept of selling the business back to the candidate, it depends on the cycle that we're in. You know, there's always too many candidates, and then there's too many jobs, and there's too many candidates, and it continuously does this.
Yeah.
I think some companies can get away with being arrogant and going, we are, so you want to work for us. Not usually for very long. That usually disappears, like most things in life. I think companies who don't do that and always try and sell their businesses are going to attract better people.
I think that's such a pivotal point, because that's what I'm trying to get across here. And what you're saying is, in the past, I feel like a lot of businesses have been, we're the ones hiring, we'll pick the best.
Still plenty that do.
Yeah, and that's it, you know, like this is our company and it's a privilege for you to work here.
Yep.
Whereas, you know, we've had a different view on that. It's providing them an opportunity, and that's where we see it as being not a sales pitch, but effectively the start of a relationship, and that's something you've taught me. So talk a little bit more about that as well. I mean, because that relationship can really be profitable, but it needs to be profitable for both.
It does need to be profitable for both, and this is where I think, and I taught you through this when we first started working together. Most companies, I mean, now obviously with the latest business, we really just work with founders and CEOs. So it's a little bit different. And when you're working with large corporates, it's not as easy to get talented people to recognize this. But ultimately, if you want to make a successful hire, the first thing you've got to do is to be able to articulate your story as a business to them. And most people, it's not that they don't know it, they've just never sat down and thought about it. And we talked about this, and we did this with you, right? And we sat down and we said, okay, well, we need to work out a story. It's just like going back to school. You need an essay, beginning, middle, and end. So you need to be able to articulate what made you start that business. Now, if you're a larger company, that's still very valid. Where you are now, and you know what's occurred and how you've got there, and you need to include some of the things that you've stuffed up along the way. That's really, really important to build trust with candidates. And say, look, this is where we were, this is why we did what we did, this is where we are now, which is nothing like why we started, because it never is. And this is where we believe we are going. And if you can articulate those three things very clearly, the people that will want to work for you are the people who align with that story. And if they align with that story, they'll stay with you and they'll do great work. If they don't, then they'll just come in and be another employee. And very few companies take the time to do that. And the bigger companies sometimes try and do it, but it gets lost, or, you know, they just don't know. And a lot of the founders I work with don't know. They do know, but they don't know. And you have to sort of sit there and tease it out of them. And much like you're doing today, talking to me, you're talking to them about everything that's happened, and you're trying to pull out the pieces that are really important and then teach them how to articulate that really quickly and with some energy.
Yeah.
Because you've got to talk about it with energy as well. I'm a big believer in energy, which may surprise you. I think you should put energy into everything, because without it, it's just a bit flat, a bit like my tennis.
Well, I can't comment on the tennis game. I haven't seen it yet, so we'll have to go out for a hit at some point. But that's obviously a great tip for businesses to consider when they're looking to hire. Now, you've noted a really interesting point, because I think this is another great tip for businesses. Picking the right recruitment partners is super key. We've worked with a number of different recruitment partners. In all honesty and full transparency, as you've rightfully pointed out, I feel like some recruitment agents may get it wrong, where they feel like they're selling the role to an individual, in one sense. And I feel like sometimes businesses can feel as if they're being sold a candidate without the, I guess, right intention in mind. So what is it that you think is so different about you and your group at the Nudge?
It's not just us, Nudge. I think the larger companies have lost their way. They don't teach. You know, a lot of those recruiters are terrible. Not their own fault. They're just not taught. they're taught that this is a machine. This is a cookie cutter machine. You follow these simple KPIs, and at the end of the day, you will bill X amount of money, which will make us X amount of money because we know how many consultants. And it becomes a factory, right? And they still operate that way, and it works, and it makes money, but it doesn't get great outcomes for the consultants because they probably don't love their job. It doesn't have great outcomes for the candidates. It doesn't have great outcomes for the clients. But that's the industry. It's changing. But it's slowly changing, and I think they're just not educated enough. There's a lot of really good recruiters out there, and the good recruiters are 1,500 times better than the average ones. It's not a close call.
Yeah.
But the average ones are average ones because no one's told them how to be good ones. Yeah. In my belief, obviously there's some average ones because they're average.
Yeah.
But most of them I think have the potential.
And it's likely, I would assert that there can be, I guess, a sales-focused culture without the underlying, I guess, ownership culture of helping clients match the right people. Would you agree?
I think you're right. I think people won't like it when I say this, but I genuinely believe to be a really good recruiter, you need to be a people pleaser. You need to have a genuine desire to please people. You need to please the person who you're getting the job for. You need to want them to be really, really happy. And you need to please your client. You want them to be really, really happy. And if you go into it with any other motive, i.e. a fee, or this guy needs a job, I just need to get rid of him, or they just need that role filled, doesn't mean you won't have success, but you probably won't enjoy it, and they probably won't enjoy the experience or you.
Yeah.
So I think natural people pleasers are very good at recruitment. There are a lot more female people pleasers than there are male, unfortunately. I think women are far better at recruitment than men, in my personal opinion.
Okay.
I don't just think it's the empathy, which is what everyone says, which is just a bit of a cliche.
Yeah.
I think it's that women are because society has forced them to be probably more people pleaser driven than most men. Certainly not all.
Interesting.
And that won't be a popular statement, so we'll put that out nice and loud.
Look, it's a really interesting point to dive into, because I know you say it broadly, but it may not apply to all recruiters, most certainly. But I guess in your experience, you found that can be the case.
I've had a lot of recruiters work for me over the years. I mean, hundreds and hundreds, and it's just that's my experience. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my experience. Maybe that's an Australian thing. I never had any work for me in the UK, obviously.
Yeah.
Although we do have a couple now. Interesting, the two people I have working for me in the UK now are both men. So who knows? Maybe it is different.
Yeah. There you go.
I hadn't even thought about that.
If we were then to jump into what had you start the nudge, I mean, take us back to, obviously you went into
we could talk all day about those. I mean, look, the other two companies were traditional recruitment companies.
Yep.
I entered both. One I founded, and we sold to a listed company. The other one I bought 50% of when it was about a year old, and then I sold it back to the owner 7 years later. So two very different scenarios, two very different businesses, two very different exits, but they were traditional recruitment companies. You know, there was nothing we were doing that every other recruiter was doing. We were trying to do it better, but there was nothing groundbreaking about it.
Yep.
When I left the last one, I had to take some time off, as you do when you sell a business. You're not allowed to work in the industry for a period of time. And I didn't think I wanted to be in recruitment. I hadn't enjoyed the last 2 years at all, personally. The business has gone pretty well, but I personally just hadn't enjoyed it. So I didn't think I want to go back in recruitment. I was going to start a business bringing Chinese wealthy businessmen and women over so that they could gamble and get plastic surgery done and have a holiday all at the same time. Had it all set up. They were going to go to the Gold Coast. I was going to get a percentage of their losses from the casino. The plastic surgeons were going to give me. So, it was they were going to have buses. We were going to see properties and real estate. It was a genius idea.
Yeah.
We got close to doing it, and I thought, this is just never going to work. I've got no idea what I'm doing here. I was dealing with some Chinese people who I had zero trust with, and I thought, no, I'm not doing that. Thank God, because COVID would have killed it. I was then going to start a variety of different health businesses, cryotherapy, salons. I was going to try and turn rehab places into more five-star. Ridiculous ideas that I really didn't have any thoughts on, but things that I wanted to change because I had experienced them in a bad way, let's say.
Sure.
And then time passed, and I began to miss recruitment, bizarrely. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do recruitment again, it needs to be different. So what have I hated about recruitment? What could I change? And I always love startups. And for the same reason I talked about earlier, the energy, the positivity, the unbridled optimism, the speed, everything that I like, the lack of process, the lack of structure, the lack of rules. That's my world. That's what I love. So that's startups. Well, I knew for a fact that we, as in both of my previous companies, had not dealt well with startups. We had dealt with them. Hadn't been great experience from our point of view. Hadn't been a great experience from the startup point of view. I knew most startups did not like recruiters. They didn't want to use recruiters. It was a messed up scenario, but it was probably one of the biggest growth areas. So I thought, well, this is crazy. Yeah. We need to come up with something. So luckily, I had lots of time because I wasn't working. So I sat around at home. It was raining a lot because it was winter. It was cold. And as I told you, I'm solar powered, so I'm not going outside.
And how long was your hold off period?
About 9 months, I think it was in total.
Okay. Yep.
And I came up with a new idea to just build a company for startups and scale ups. So that was what my idea was. Right? How was I going to do that? So I looked at the model. I looked at where the pain points were. I looked at how we could change those. I created some very simple, subtle changes. And then I came up with all these elaborate, crazy ones that I thought were awesome.
And before we go into the next bit of what those ideas were, what was the process of you coming about that? Was there an official structured, like a design thinking style of thinking?
What do you reckon?
I'm going to say, based on your energy, you were sitting on your lounge.
There's no design
with a piece of paper.
There was no design thinking.
Okay.
I'm still not quite sure what that means. But I have recruited people with design thinking skills. I'm still not sure what they are.
Yeah,
but no, it was me sitting, actually, you're quite correct, on the couch, just trying to work it out, and then moving to the study, and then maybe moving to the dining room, maybe taking the dog for a walk, and just thinking about it constantly and just writing stuff down.
Yeah.
It was actually the first time I started using voice notes on my Apple iPhone, which I was excited about because there's a lot of features I never use, and I was excited I was finally using that feature.
See, I love that. I've found myself doing that too, and I think that's a great little tip for particularly some entrepreneurs. And I find particularly when I'm in the middle of doing something else and I've got a great idea, you and I both know with the energy that's flowing through our body, we don't have the time to just stop and write something down. So putting it into a voice memo in the Apple iPhone definitely works.
It does, but more importantly, you're doing something they didn't do before, which I just find insanely exciting. I know I'm very easily excited, but I was just, I know this has got like 18,000 different features on it, of which I use 8. The fact I'm now using 9 is a massive step forwards for me. I was so excited by that, simply.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of that, and there was no structure to it at all. And
Okay.
things would just come to me all the time. Throughout
And
the
so
day.
what were the things that you wanted to differentiate yourself from a traditional recruitment business?
So if you look at it from a recruiter's point of view first, which most people want to look at it from the startup's point of view first, but I figured, well, if you can't make the recruiter happy, then it doesn't really matter. So the recruiters didn't like dealing with startups because the fees were low, typically because they didn't have any money. They changed the role constantly. There were no job descriptions. There was so much ambiguity. It wasn't funny. There was no clarity, which is all the things I love, right? Also, people would leave quite a lot because everyone wants to work for a startup until they go and work for a startup because they've got no idea what it's like. They think it's all beanbags and ping pong, of which it's none. So they were doing refills for free, as in the traditional recruitment model works. You know, if someone leaves within 3 or 6 months, you often have to refill that role for free. So no one wanted to work with them. So, why would I work for a low fee where there's a high percentage of me having to refill it and he's going to change the role 19 times on me whilst I'm recruiting for it? It seems like a stupid idea. Give me that CommBank role that I can just do.
So, I mean, this in itself sounds interesting because when a lot of people think about business ideas, they think about the client in mind, whereas it really sounds like you've thought about the people that are going to work for you in mind.
Well, I had to think about that first because if I couldn't find a way of making recruiters want to do it, it didn't really matter how I changed it for the startups. So you've got to do that first. Like the people who are actually going to do the work have to want to do the work. Otherwise, it's not going to get done.
And I think this is super interesting because it's, I guess, the foundation of a people-led business. It's you focusing on your people first to then deliver what your clients are going to want.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I just thought there was no point otherwise.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think you put it a little bit more eloquently than I did. But essentially, I suppose you're right.
Yeah.
So we kind of solved all those. But I won't go into the details of how we solved them because we'll be here literally for days.
Absolutely.
And then you go to the client side. So I came up with some ideas. And look, I had so many fantastic ideas. You know what really upset me was when we did finally launch, everybody loved the really obvious, simple things, and no one loved all these incredible ideas I came up with. So we had to drop them all. And I think that's something that I've noted in a lot of books and podcasts and things that I've read, is that you can come up with all the fanciful ideas and elaborate ideas and crazy ass schemes you want. The reality is it's small, subtle, simple changes that have massive impact. And then you go, "God, is that all it really took?" And it honestly is. And I think people overcomplicate things. They overcomplicate problem solving, which I certainly did in this instance. But I had plenty of time, so it didn't matter. But so we did that. We went out to the clients and this new model, came up with the name. I don't know if you ever had to, you would have had to come up with your name, right? So I don't know how you went through that. I've never enjoyed coming up with business names. The first one was Fingerprint. Second one was the business that I bought into, so that was fine. That was actually, I didn't have to think about that. And then Nudge, well, I was trying to, all the words are registered now. You try and put any word in there, and I thought, well, I could make a word up, but that's, I'm not a tech company. I don't know if I can carry that off. So I need to think about something. I want it to have a meaning, because if I'm going to go out and sell something, I need to have a story, because we know that, right? We need a story. So I thought, well, recruitment's changed. We don't have resumes posted in anymore, but we actually don't even advertise anymore, really. Advertising is very ineffective. Probably 80 to 90% of the roles we fill, we headhunt. And there's this big thing about the nudge theory going on. And I thought, well, that's kind of like nudging someone, giving them a nudge, nudging them out of their job. Put in the nudge group. And I wanted a .com because I knew this business was going to be global. So I wanted a .com. So that made it even harder. So nudge.com, obviously gone. Nudgerecruitment.com, obviously. When I went through all these, eventually I got to thenudgegroup.com. Boom, done, sold. Yep. And then the logo will make you laugh even more. So I don't like doing logos because, again, they're really difficult to get right, and they actually don't really matter, but they do matter at the beginning because you haven't got a business, so you've got nothing else to think about. Yep. So I paid this company quite a lot of money to come up with all these logos, and they came back to me, and I hated them all. And at the same time, we were designing the website. And I said to my web guy who was in, I think he was in Indonesia? He was somewhere offshore. Yep. And he said, I need your high-res logo. I said, I haven't got one. I said, they're all horrible. I hate them all. I said, can you just create something for me? And he did in 2 minutes. And that is our logo today. It was created for free by a guy who I've never met, whose name I can't even remember. And I'm really sorry about that if you're listening. And it's awesome. I love my logo. He just did. I was like, that's awesome. He loved the color, everything. I just loved it. And that's where the logo came from.
I think there's something in that. Anyway, you've already mentioned how you love simplifying things. And, really, there's no point. I mean, no offense to graphic designers, but at some point,
I don't think you've definitely offended the graphic designers before you finish this sentence. Just so you know,
at some point, making it simpler is going to be best. I mean, look, our first logo was freelancer.com. Shout out to them. Someone in India who also did it for us. So
it might have been the same guy.
It could have been.
This guy could be worth billions if he knew he had this skill.
He's a real innovator. So tell us though, what is it specifically that makes Nudge different to the clients?
Look, I think part of the reason I think I found it very easy to resonate with founders was because I built and sold 3 companies.
Sure.
So that instantly, they think, okay, this guy's not just another recruiter. He has actually done a lot of what I want to do, particularly the selling, right? Because that's what every founder generally wants to do. In some way, they want to exit. So I think that helped resonate. But what we do is we're not specific to a domain, like we're not specific to IT or marketing or digital. We do all those kinds of things, but we're specific to those companies. And the idea was find founders who really have no idea what they're doing. So we started with the very early stage ones when we started. And help them design their plan, do all this consulting, help them build their employee brand, teach them how to recruit, teach them how to interview, do all that for free, but just charge them for the recruitment part. So genuinely, and this is such a cliche because every recruiter goes, we want to be your partner. I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to be their partner. I wanted to be their recruiter, but I just wanted to help them. And that was probably the main reason it worked, is because I just wanted to help these people build these businesses, because there's nothing more rewarding than building your own business, and there's nothing more rewarding than watching others build their businesses. It's very much like teaching. It's very much like having children and watching them achieve things. There's a huge amount of selfish satisfaction that comes out of helping people.
Yep.
And I think people don't acknowledge that. Helping people is not always about helping people. Helping people is usually about the satisfaction you get as an individual from helping them. It makes you feel good. It genuinely does. That's not to say you do it 100% for selfish reasons, but I think we should acknowledge that, because a lot of people don't. And I think it's really important. You get a massive amount.
And look, I think too, with the businesses that I've been involved in as well, a lot of the service is value first and then charge later.
Absolutely.
And I think it doesn't matter what business model you're in. Doesn't matter if you're selling a product or a service. I think you have to give value before you can make a sale or charge. And I think that in itself is what makes your business different, in the sense that you're educating, partnering, whilst you don't like the word partner, but you're educating, you're educating effectively your client on how better to recruit. Now, what is it that you do differently? I mean, what sort of tech do you use? I know you use some videos and stuff like that.
We use all the normal tech. Like I said to you, I think the important thing for any business is the employer brand, particularly now when it's such candidate short. So we help them grow that, and we do that like we talked about through the show, the Give It a Nudge show, which is a YouTube show where we get them on, and we literally, the process that I went through with you to tease their story out of it, we do it and we film it. And we turn it into a TV show, and we're actually going live. We're going to be doing some live shows around the country later this year with a festival. So that's going to be quite cool.
Yeah, wow!
Can't wait for that, to be honest.
Yeah,
but
may as well give it a plug now, mate. It's the Nudge.
Well, I just did. Yeah.
The Nudge show.
So yeah, we get them on the Give It a Nudge show, and that we then can use that media, and we cut that up into little pieces and grabs, and we put it out, and we help grow their brands. But we also use it when we're headhunting. So if you think about, if you're a highly prized developer or marketer or whatever it is, you might be getting, 10 to 20 recruiters a week approaching you. That's how bad it is at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, you're not going to respond to all of them. So how do you differentiate yourself in a text box? It's not easy. So what we do is we embed the video or a short portion of it. So I always ask a question at the end of the show: why should someone come and work for you? And then the founder talks about why they should work for you. And no one can articulate that better, particularly as we've just teased the story out them all the way, right? So they're primed and ready to do it.
Yeah.
And then they talk about it with all this energy and passion. So we take that 30-minute grab and we go, hey, got this job for you. Don't let me tell about it. Listen to this.
Yeah.
And our response rates go up from about 30% to about 70 to 80% because they suddenly see this passionate person talking about this business. And if they love it, and they want to hear about it.
Yeah.
So that helps enormously with the headhunting. We let them pay the bills over 6 months because they have bad cash flow. It enables them to hire people quicker. We do a lot of... we also put that as a podcast as well, but we also give them a lot of free media, and we spend a lot of time really helping them flush out the roles. So the thing that frustrates a lot of recruiters, and personally it's something that I love, is that most roles in startups are very ambiguous. They actually don't really know what they need. Now, the more we do this, the better we get at it. So we've brought on 70 new startups into Nudge in the last 18 months. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's just the companies. I think we're close to 200 roles that we've filled now. So we're getting much better at this, at really helping them. And I won't employ anyone who doesn't really genuinely care naturally, which is why I've got nearly all women, about helping these companies grow. And that's the most important thing, because a big part of what makes us different is the sheer volume of time we spend with them getting it right. The return comes, everyone goes, how can you afford to do that? The return comes in that startups don't hire 1 or 2 people, they hire 20 or 30.
Yep.
So by putting that time in early on, then they really we get very, as the word is, sticky with that client. They want to keep us in. We'll also often take payment in part equity, which makes us even stickier as a client. So we're building, we're not partnering, we're building a relationship that's quite embedded with them.
We can say investing, it's fine.
Say investing. I'm going to think of a better word, but maybe by the end of this show. But it's a different relationship. It's a very trying to think of the word. This is my dyslexia coming. It's symbiotic. Is that the word? No, I think I've got that wrong. But it's we get as much from each other as they get as much from me as I give them.
Yep.
And I mean that in the way that we haven't done a single piece of business development since we started this business. Our business has grown through word of mouth.
Yep.
So founders know founders, and obviously some of them watch the show and so forth. But I probably get 2 to 3 referrals of new clients every single week.
And obviously that, you get referrals.
That speaks volumes, right?
Absolutely.
That means we're doing it right. So we're just going to continue doing what we're doing until those referrals stop. And then we'll have to look at it and maybe change.
And look, I think any passionate entrepreneur or passionate individual or business is going to have a whole lot of referrals that come through it. But I want to understand, quick question, are you passionate about recruitment or passionate about helping people?
I'm passionate about not necessarily helping people, just people. I find people interesting.
Cool.
I like talking to people. Or maybe it's talking at people. No, I like talking to people. I genuinely find people interesting. For example, in school or in my friend groups, or even to this day, if a new person comes in the group, I'm all over them. I want to know everything about that person. Everyone else who I know, who I love, they're completely irrelevant to me for that next 1 or 2 times we get together. I want to know everything about that person. I want to learn about that person. I want to know if there's anything I can do to help that person. I like people. Maybe it's because I can't read and write. Or hit a tennis ball. But I genuinely like people. And my dad said something to me that I will never ever forget. So I think I'd just been diagnosed as dyslexic, which was I didn't know what it meant. But my sister had just become top in law school in the whole country, right? And I'm struggling to read a bloody book. So Dad said to me, he said, "I'm not worried about you." He goes, "Because you love people and people seem to love you, so you're going to be just fine." And I'll never forget that. And that's probably the most impactful thing it's probably the only thing I remember. So it must have had an impact.
Yeah.
So I think that's just the way I'm made.
I would say that's the key to your success, no doubt. Being a people-led business, being a people-led person, people gravitate to you. And I think that's a great tip to any business owner listening today is love people.
Love people. God, that's magical.
We're
going to get some T-shirts with that.
Why is that not your slogan?
Yeah, I'm not sure that would send the right message. We could get all sorts of people interpreting that.
That's
love people.
Plenty of different nudges going that way.
Imagine if you have a love people event. Yeah, lots of nudges.
Tell me, Gracie, what's your vision for the future? What's your vision for your business? What's your vision for recruitment?
So my vision for the business, like everything, has been very carefully and strategically planned and has really only become clear to me in the last few months. I had no idea what my vision was. I'll tell you a funny story. When my first employee, Dana, who worked with me at Fingerprint, agreed to come work for me, which I was so pleased about. And she's unbelievable and has been so amazing. But so she's been working with me for maybe a year, 14 months, 15 months. And I don't remember where we were. I think we might have been doing a filming of the Give It a Nudge show, and she was there. And she works remotely because she lives quite far down in Coaldale, so she only comes in once a month. Anyway, I'd never really noticed her computer. And I said to her, "What the is that computer? That is like the biggest, ugliest, oldest computer I've ever seen in my life. I thought you said you didn't want me to buy you one. You were going to buy your own one." She goes, "Well, to be honest, I wasn't sure if the company was going to work, so I just bought the cheapest computer I could find." And I'm like, oh my God. My first employee who has equity in the business bought the cheapest computer because she wasn't sure if it was going to work. Can you believe that?
Wow. Incredible.
But anyway, I digress. What was the question?
The question was the vision for your business.
Vision for my business.
Which we've established that there is no vision.
No,
like
there is.
Oh, there is.
Well, there
Great.
is. But it's only really become apparent to me in the last 2 months, I would say. And I just communicated to the team last month. And I think they were as surprised as I was. So
that you had a vision or that?
That I had one, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think, or that I was able to articulate it. I think, so the vision for it today, not saying it'll be the same in a few months, is we've opened up the UK, which was just an opportunistic thing that we did. And I always wanted to have 4 offices. I always wanted to have one in Australia, one in London, one in Singapore, and one in the States. That's still the case. But now I want to have, and the reason we did that is because we wanted to help startups grow into other countries and startups come into this country, and that's what we've been doing. So that's why we've got roles in America and Canada and Europe and England and all those kinds of things. And we love helping them go overseas. You know, they don't have to go and find a partner over there. They can use a partner they know to help them go overseas. So that was always part of that plan. But I think now the 4 offices, recruitment team in each of those offices, each office has a co-working space. Now that co-working space is for the early stage startups who perhaps we take equity in rather than money, so they've got somewhere to use. I want to build a Give It a Nudge studio in each one of those offices because I've become to realize how powerful that is. And then I'm in talks at the moment with some people about building a venture fund so that we can actually go out. And there's this real gap with startups where once you've got your seed money or your family and friend money, and before you get to Series A, which is where you get your first venture capital check, there's this massive gap. It's very hard to get money. You know, it's less than $1 million. No one wants to lend it to you. So I want to build a fund where we can choose to do that as well. So essentially, it's kind of not a one-stop shop because I hate that saying, but it's a global business, and I would imagine it's about 50 or 60 people that not only takes equity in people, but can potentially always invest, but also films them for their show and also does their recruitment and gives them a space to work in. And that sits there globally and helps all these guys rise up to the next level. And then obviously they'll leave the nest and become their own adult startups, and we'll still continue to recruit for them, but really nurture that sort of lower space because since I fully immersed myself into it, there's a huge gap there, not just here, globally, there's a gap in that space. And a lot of good businesses fall over there.
And I have no doubt you'll be successful at that, Stevie, just because particularly when you're looking at investing in businesses, it's all about investing in people. It's not necessarily always about the idea. It's about backing that founder, because I think any good founder will make it work. Regardless.
Yeah, I think there's an element of truth to that. I mean, I need some very smart people to come and help me build that venture fund, because I have no clue whatsoever. Sure. I'm not good with spreadsheets. I'm not good with models, but that's fine. It's going to be part of the business. It's certainly not my expertise, but it's something that I want as part of Nudge. Yeah,
that's an exciting future. I look forward to bearing witness to that. And what's your vision for recruitment moving forward?
I don't know, because I'm really confused about this. There's been AI coming into recruitment for a very long time. They haven't nailed it. They're a long way away from nailing it, but it's moving so quickly. I do feel that ultimately at some stage they will. When I wasn't working, I did this thing where I thought, I haven't had any time because I've been working too hard to sort of demo the latest recruitment software. So I decided I was going to do a demo a day for 30 days. Never do this. Worst decision ever made, but I did finish it. I hated the last 10 days of this. I was just so over demos, but I did a demo a day. So I saw a lot of the recruitment software that came out, and some of the stuff there is amazing, and it's not working, but when they do get it working, it will change recruitment altogether. You'll never be able to completely remove the human element, I don't believe, not in my lifetime, but I think it's a lot more of it is going to become a lot more automated. What's going to work first, I don't know. But I think it just needs to become, people need to stop calling it a sales job, and they need to start seeing it as a service, because that's what it is. It's a service to two different types of people. It's, I hate to say it, a bit like whereas the dating service has a responsibility not to pair you with an axe murderer, I think recruiters should have a responsibility not to put bad people into bad jobs or people into bad companies. Yeah. And I think more people just need to think of it a bit more like that. But I think technology will totally change that, and we'll just try and adapt ourselves to make sure that we use that technology to do what we're doing better.
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting, Steve, because we've almost come full circle where we established the challenge in recruitment is, some recruiters viewing it as a sales job, and how potentially tech can bring it back to just service-based and focusing on people, because it's a people-led business, which I think is fantastic. I think there's never going to be, like you said, the removal of that human element. I think AI can certainly impact a number of different industries, but being a people business, I have no doubt that recruitment will always have that human element.
Well, one day we won't recruit, right? Because we won't have any jobs. It'll be like that movie WALL-E, where we all just sit around on floating chairs and the robots do everything for us.
I have some suspicion that I won't be alive when that happens.
I don't think I will either, which I think is good. I don't think that would be a good way for me to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, mate.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Do you want to plug your show, your Instagram, your LinkedIn? Go ahead.
No, it's been good. I feel like I've had a therapy session to talk through my whole life.
Look, I think there's been some real nuggets of gold for some business owners, whether it's people related, whether it's not necessarily always having a vision, but then slowly but surely creating one and getting clearer on what that might be. So, mate, it's been a fantastic session.
Look, thank you. And look, if anyone wants to know anything, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat to anyone about anything.
That's Steve Grace. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, Steve.
Thanks, mate.
Mate, thank you.
Cool.
Socius, thank you for joining us today. Please hit the subscribe button if you've enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to be part of the Socius community, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay in touch. Cheers.